He was just a client until she discovered his secret. From that moment on, her life would change forever, and nothing would ever be the same again. Rain poured relentlessly over Maplewood that night, the heavy droplets striking the asphalt as if trying to wash away all the small town's troubles. Emily sprinted through the drenched streets, her Maple Diner uniform clinging to her body and wet hair plastered to her face. The clock already read 7:10 p.m., and she was late for her night shift. The thought of the unpaid bills stacked on her kitchen table tightened her chest. She couldn't afford to lose working hours. Pushing open the diner's glass door, the bell above jingled softly, announcing her arrival. The warm interior contrasted sharply with the cold dampness outside. "You're late, Emily," said Sarah, the manager, casting a mildly disapproving glance. "I know, I'm sorry. The storm delayed the bus," she replied, breathless as she grabbed her apron. Scanning the room, her eyes landed on Jack, the quiet customer who always occupied the corner booth. He was there every night with his black coffee and a worn-out notebook where he wrote or sketched. She was never quite sure. Today, however, he seemed different. His brows were furrowed, jaw tense, tearing out pages and crumpling them forcefully. Intrigued, Emily approached with the coffee pot. "Refill?" she offered with a timid smile. Jack looked up, his blue eyes reflecting a mix of frustration and fatigue. "Yes, please," he murmured. As she poured, a gust of wind blew open the diner's door, causing a hurried customer to rush in. Startled, Emily spilled coffee on the table and a bit onto Jack's notebook. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, grabbing a cloth to clean up the mess. "It's fine," he replied, though his voice betrayed slight annoyance. While trying to dry the notebook, one of the soaked pages slid to the floor. Emily quickly bent down to pick it up, and her eyes captured an image that made her freeze. It was a detailed drawing of the Maplewood Community Center, a historic building set to be demolished to make way for a modern complex. The center was special to Emily. Her mother had taught art classes there before she passed away, and so many precious memories resided within those walls. You drew this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jack hesitated for a moment before answering. "Yes, it's part of a project I'm working on." Emily's heart raced. "A project? What exactly are you doing with the community center?" Jack averted his gaze, appearing uncomfortable. "It's just work," he said evasively, gathering his things. "Sorry about the coffee. I have to go." Before she could say anything else, he stood up and left the diner, leaving Emily with a mix of confusion and apprehension. Why did he have those drawings? Was he responsible for demolishing the place that meant so much to her? Emily's mind swirled with unanswered questions. A knot formed in her stomach, a sense of urgency taking over. She needed to find out the truth. That night, she could barely sleep. The raindrops tapped against her small apartment window, echoing the storm inside her. Jack's face kept appearing in her thoughts, along with the image of the wet drawing. "I can't just leave it like this," she murmured to herself. Determined, she made a plan. The next morning, she got up early, despite her exhaustion. She dressed quickly and headed to the community center. The doors were locked, and a large condemned notice hung at the entrance. She ran her fingers over the faded letters, feeling the sadness and impending loss. "Emily?" a familiar voice called out behind her. She turned to see Mr. Thompson, the center's custodian for decades. "What brings you here so early, dear?" She sighed. "I needed to see the place. I think I found someone who might be involved in the demolition." Mr. Thompson's eyes narrowed. "Who might that be?" She hesitated. "A customer at the diner. His name is Jack. I saw drawings of the center in his notebook. I think he might be the architect or something." The custodian nodded slowly. "If that's true, we need to act fast. This place means a lot to all of us." Emily agreed. "I'll try to talk to him again today. I need to know what's going on." The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety. When her shift began, every time the door opened, her heart skipped a beat, hoping it was Jack. Finally, as evening fell, he walked in. Their eyes met for a brief moment before he sat in his usual spot. Mustering her courage, Emily grabbed 2 cups of coffee and walked over to his table. "Can we talk?" she asked, placing a cup in front of him. Jack sighed but didn't dismiss her. "About what?" "About the community center. Please, I need to understand what's happening." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm not sure I can discuss details of my work." I know it might be a lot to ask, but that place is important to me, to the community. If you're involved in the demolition, maybe you can help us save the center." Her pleading eyes met his, and for a moment, something softened in his expression. "It's not that simple," he finally replied. "Decisions have already been made, contracts signed. I'm just the architect assigned to the project." "But you have the power to influence," Emily insisted. "Please, Jack, there's so much history in that building. We can't just let them tear it down." He looked at her, the determination in her eyes unsettling him. "Why is this so important to you?" She took a deep breath. "My mother used to teach art there. It's where I spent much of my childhood. It's more than a building, it's a home to so many memories." Jack seemed to consider her words. "I didn't know that. To me, it was just another project." A pause followed, heavy with tension. "Maybe there's something we can do," he said finally. A spark of hope ignited in Emily's heart. "Do you really think so?" He nodded. "I can't promise anything, but I'll see what I can do." That night, Emily felt torn between hope and fear. She knew it was an uphill battle, but at least now she had someone on the other side willing to listen. As she closed the diner, she looked at the empty table where Jack had sat and smiled slightly. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. What she didn't know was that this encounter was just the beginning of a journey that would transform not only her life, but also that of the entire Maplewood community. And as the moon shone between the scattered clouds, Emily felt that a new chapter was about to begin. The morning sun pierced through the thin curtains of Emily's modest apartment, casting a warm glow that contrasted sharply with the turmoil inside her. She had spent the night tossing and turning, her mind replaying every detail of her encounters with Jack. Determined to get answers, she decided to visit the diner before her shift, hoping to catch him during his usual morning coffee. As she approached the Maple Diner, her nerves tightened. What would she say? How would he react? Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. The familiar chime sounded, and there he was, sitting in his usual corner, a steaming cup in front of him, eyes focused on his notebook. Summoning her courage, Emily walked over. "Mind if I join you?" she asked softly. Jack looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Sure," he replied cautiously. She sat down, her hands clasped tightly around her own coffee cup. "I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation," she began. "I need to know more about the project you're working on." Jack sighed, closing his notebook. "I told you, there's not much I can share. It's just work." "But it's not just any building," she insisted. "The community center means so much to so many people, to me." Her voice wavered slightly. Jack studied her for a moment. "Why is it so important to you?" Taking a deep breath, Emily opened up. "My mother used to teach dance classes there. It's where I learned to dance, where I made some of my happiest memories. After she passed away, that place became a sanctuary for me. Seeing it torn down, it's like losing her all over again." A flicker of empathy crossed Jack's eyes. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly. "Thank you," she replied. "But that's why I can't just stand by and watch it disappear. Please, if there's anything you can tell me." Jack hesitated, then leaned forward. "Off the record?" She nodded eagerly. "Yes, I'm the architect assigned to design the new complex that'll replace the community center," he admitted. "But to be honest, I've been feeling disconnected from my work lately. Projects come and go, buildings rise and fall, but they all start to look the same after a while." "Then why do it?" Emily asked gently. "It's complicated," he replied. "I've always loved designing structures, creating something from nothing. But lately, it feels like I'm just following orders, not creating anything meaningful." Emily saw an opportunity. "Maybe this is your chance to make a real difference. Instead of tearing down the center, what if you proposed renovating it, preserving its history while bringing in something new?" Jack looked thoughtful. The company isn't interested in renovations. They want modern, flashy designs that attract investors. "But what about the people, the community?" she pressed. "Isn't architecture supposed to serve them?" He ran a hand through his hair. "In an ideal world, yes, but corporate decisions are driven by profit." "Maybe they just need to see the value," Emily suggested. "If we could show them how important the center is to the town." Jack sighed. "I admire your passion, but it's not that simple." "Nothing worth doing ever is," she countered. He chuckled softly. "You make a good point. A moment of silence settled between them, charged with unspoken possibilities. Jack finally broke it. "Tell me more about your mother, about the center." A smile touched Emily's lips. She was a wonderful dancer, graceful, vibrant. She believed that dance could heal the soul. She taught classes to anyone who wanted to learn, kids, adults, seniors. The center was always filled with music and laughter because of her. Jack listened intently, his gaze softening. "It sounds like a special place." "It is," she affirmed. "And it's not just about my memories. So many people have stories tied to that building. Weddings, celebrations, community events. It's woven into the fabric of Maplewood." He nodded slowly. "I had no idea." "That's why it deserves a chance," Emily said earnestly. "Please, Jack, help me save it." He looked conflicted, his eyes reflecting an internal struggle. "I'll see what I can do," he finally said. "I can't make any promises, but maybe there's a way to present an alternative to the company." Hope surged within her. "Thank you. That's all I ask." They exchanged a tentative smile, a newfound understanding bridging the gap between them. Over the next few days, they met regularly. Emily provided Jack with photos, stories, and testimonials from community members. Each tale seemed to weigh on him, adding layers to his perception of the project. One afternoon, as they sat surrounded by piles of memorabilia, Jack confessed, "You know, when I first took this job, it was just another assignment. But hearing all of this, it's changed how I see things." Emily looked at him thoughtfully. "What made you become an architect?" He paused. "My father was a builder. He constructed homes, schools, places where life happened. I wanted to design those places, to create spaces that mattered." "So what happened?" he sighed. "I got caught up in the corporate world. Deadlines, budgets, impressing clients. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of why I started." "Maybe this is your chance to get back to that," she suggested gently. He met her gaze. "Maybe it is." Despite his growing conviction, Jack knew the challenges ahead. Presenting a renovation proposal to his firm would not be easy. They were profit-driven, with little regard for sentimental value. "Will you stand with me when I pitch this?" he asked Emily one evening. "Of course," she replied without hesitation. "We're in this together." As the day of the meeting approached, Jack prepared his presentation, infusing it with the heart and soul of the community's stories. Emily helped gather signatures and letters of support, hoping to sway the decision-makers. But doubts lingered. "What if they say no?" she asked anxiously. Jack reached out, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Then at least we'll know we tried." The chapter closed with them standing outside the corporate building, a towering structure of glass and steel that seemed to dwarf their efforts. But despite the looming challenge, there was determination in their eyes, a spark that refused to be extinguished. The morning air was crisp as Jack stood before the sleek, glass facade of his company's headquarters in downtown Chicago. Clutching his proposal tightly, he felt a mix of determination and anxiety. Images of the Maplewood Community Center flashed through his mind. The laughter of children, the stories Emily had shared, the sense of history embedded in its walls. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. In the conference room, executives sat around a long table, their expressions stoic and expectant. Martin Graves, the company's CEO, gestured for Jack to begin. "We're eager to see your designs for the Maplewood project," he said with a calculated smile. Jack connected his laptop to the projector, his palms sweating slightly. "Thank you all for being here," he began. "I've been working on a new proposal that I believe aligns with both our company's goals and the community's needs." As he clicked through the slides, the room filled with images of a renovated community center, modern, yet preserving the building's historic charm. He emphasized sustainability, community engagement, and long-term benefits over immediate profits. Silence followed as he concluded. The executives exchanged glances before Martin spoke, his tone icy. "This is not what we commissioned you to do, Jack. We have contracts in place for a complete redevelopment." Jack swallowed hard. "I understand, but after learning about the center's significance, I believe this approach could enhance our company's reputation and foster goodwill." Martin's eyes narrowed. "Our investors expect maximized returns, not goodwill gestures. We're in the business of progress, not preservation." Another executive chimed in. "The cost of renovation exceeds the budget allocated. Demolition and new construction are more efficient." Gathering his courage, Jack replied. Sometimes the most valuable investments aren't the most immediate or the most obvious. Preserving the center could set a precedent for responsible development. Martin leaned forward. Let me be clear, Jack. Either you proceed with the original plan, or we'll find someone else who will. Consider this your final warning. A heavy weight settled in the room. Jack looked around, realizing that his passion was met with indifference, even disdain. I need some time to think, he said quietly. Exiting the building, Jack felt a storm of emotions. Frustration, disappointment, but also a newfound resolve. He knew what he had to do. That evening, he met Emily at the diner. She could tell by his expression that the meeting hadn't gone well. They didn't go for it, did they? She asked gently. He shook his head. They rejected the proposal outright and threatened to fire me if I don't follow the original plan. Emily's face fell. I'm so sorry. He looked into her eyes. I can't, in good conscience, be part of destroying something so important. I want to help you save the center. A spark ignited between them, a shared purpose. But what can we do? She wondered aloud. We rally the community, Jack said firmly. We make our voices heard. If we can show there's enough opposition, maybe the company will reconsider. Emily nodded, hope rekindling. Yes, we can hold a town meeting, gather support, maybe even get the local press involved. Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly. Flyers were printed and distributed, social media pages created, and personal invitations extended to every resident they could reach. The town buzzed with whispers of the upcoming meeting. However, doubts lingered. At the diner, some patrons expressed skepticism. Those big companies don't listen to small towns like ours, one man remarked. Why bother? It's a done deal, said another. But Emily refused to be discouraged. We have to try, she insisted. If we don't stand up now, we'll regret it forever. The night of the meeting arrived. The old community center's hall was filled beyond capacity. Anxious faces, murmured conversations, a palpable mix of hope and apprehension. Jack stood at the front alongside Emily, papers in hand, heart pounding. Emily stepped forward. Thank you all for coming. As many of you know, the community center is slated for demolition, but we believe that together we can change that. Jack took the microphone. I'm Jack Thompson, the architect assigned to the project. I've seen firsthand how much this place means to you all. I'm here to help fight for its preservation. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Hands shot up, voices eager to be heard. One by one, residents shared heartfelt stories. Weddings held in the hall, children learning to read in its classrooms, generations bonded through shared experiences. An elderly woman stood up, her voice shaky but strong. This center is the soul of our town. It's where my late husband and I met 50 years ago. Losing it would be like losing him all over again. Tears glistened in many eyes, including Jack's. The weight of their mission pressed upon him, but so did the strength of their unity. As the meeting concluded, they collected signatures for a petition and formed committees to handle various tasks: media outreach, legal advice, fundraising. The momentum was building. Outside, under the glow of the streetlights, Emily turned to Jack. Do you think it'll be enough? He gazed at the gathering of determined faces dispersing into the night. I don't know, he admitted. But seeing everyone come together like this, it has to count for something. The following morning, an article appeared in the local newspaper. Maplewood residents rally to save historic center. It featured a photo of Emily and Jack standing side by side, embodying the town's fighting spirit. Back at the company's headquarters, Martin slammed the paper onto his desk. What is this? He barked during a conference call with Jack. It's the community expressing their concerns, Jack replied calmly. This is unacceptable. You're undermining our project and stirring up trouble. I'm advocating for a more responsible approach, Jack countered. One that considers the people who will be affected. Martin's tone turned icy. You've left us no choice. You're off the project. Expect to receive termination papers by the end of the day. A knot formed in Jack's stomach, but a sense of liberation washed over him. Very well. Hanging up, he took a deep breath. Unemployed and facing a corporate giant, the odds were stacked against him. But he wasn't alone. Meeting Emily later, he shared the news. They fired me. She looked at him with concern. I'm so sorry, Jack. He managed a small smile. Don't be. It just means I can focus all my energy on saving the center. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "Absolutely." Word spread quickly about Jack's dismissal, fueling the community's determination. Donations poured in to support their cause, and neighboring towns began to take notice. However, the company retaliated by issuing cease and desist letters, threatening legal action against anyone interfering with their plans. Fear began to seep into the community. At an emergency meeting, tensions ran high. "We can't fight them," one man said defeatedly. "They have too much power." Emily stood up, her voice firm. "If we back down now, they'll think they can bully anyone. We have to stand our ground." Jack added, "They may have resources, but we have each other. And sometimes, that's enough to make a difference." The chapter closed with the community at a crossroads, uncertain but united, facing a formidable adversary with unwavering resolve. The question loomed, could their collective efforts sway the company's decision, or would their beloved center become another casualty of corporate ambition? The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Maplewood Community Center as Emily sorted through boxes of old documents in the dusty storage room. The scent of aged paper and a hint of mildew filled the air. She and Jack had decided to dig into the center's history, hoping to find anything that might strengthen their case against the corporation. Old event programs, faded photographs, and handwritten notes were scattered around her. As she lifted a tattered manila folder, a photograph slipped out and fluttered to the floor. Picking it up, Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. The black and white image showed two young boys standing side by side, grinning ear to ear. One of them was unmistakably her father, the same warm eyes and dimpled smile she'd seen in family albums. But the other boy looked strikingly familiar. Her heart raced as she realized it was a younger version of Jack. Could it be? How was this possible? Just then, Jack entered the room, his arms full of more boxes. "Found some yearbooks from the 70s, he said, setting them down. Noticing the shocked expression on Emily's face, he asked, "Are you okay?" She held up the photograph. "Jack, look at this." He took the photo from her hands, his eyes widening as he recognized the faces. That's my father," he whispered. "And yours?" Emily nodded. They knew each other. Jack sank onto a nearby chair, half studying the image. "I had no idea they were friends." "Neither did I," Emily replied, her mind spinning. "My dad never mentioned your father." A sense of wonder and confusion enveloped them. "Maybe there's more here," Jack suggested, his curiosity piqued. They began sifting through the boxes with renewed urgency. Old letters, postcards, and newspaper clippings surfaced, painting a picture of a deep friendship between their fathers, Thomas and Richard. They had been inseparable during their youth, collaborating on community projects and sharing grand dreams for Maplewood's future. "Look at this," Emily said, unfolding a crinkled letter dated 1985. It was from Thomas to Richard, expressing excitement about a proposal to expand the community center. They wanted to make this place even better. Jack's brow furrowed. "So what happened? Why didn't they go through with it?" As they delved deeper, the tone of the correspondence changed. Later letters hinted at disagreements over funding and the involvement of outside investors. The last letter was particularly harsh, with accusations of betrayal and shattered trust. Emily sat back, her eyes glistening. "It seems our fathers had a falling out over the future of the center," Jack nodded slowly, "and it drove them apart." A heavy silence filled the room as they contemplated the implications. Emily broke it softly. "Do you think this rift between them is somehow connected to what's happening now?" Jack looked thoughtful. "Perhaps. Maybe history is repeating itself. Or giving us a chance to make things right," Emily suggested. He met her gaze. "You might be onto something." Determined to uncover the full story, they decided to visit Emily's grandmother, Margaret, who might shed light on the past. That evening, they arrived at her quaint cottage on the outskirts of town. The scent of freshly baked cookies greeted them as she opened the door. "Emily, dear, and you must be Jack," Margaret said warmly. Come in, come in." After settling in the cozy living room, Emily explained their discovery. Margaret's expression grew somber as she listened. "I had hoped these old wounds would stay buried," she sighed. "Please, Grandma," Emily implored. "We need to know what happened." Margaret gazed into the fireplace, lost in memories. "Your father and Jack's father were like brothers," she began. They shared a vision for this town and poured their hearts into the community center. But when a developer approached them with plans to commercialize the area, their ideals clashed. She continued, Thomas believed that bringing in investment could help the town thrive, but Richard was wary of losing the community's essence. Their disagreement escalated, and harsh words were exchanged. They never reconciled. Jack leaned forward. Do you know who the developer was? Margaret nodded sadly. It was a company called Graves Enterprises. Emily and Jack exchanged stunned glances. That's the same company we're up against now, Jack said, his voice tinged with disbelief. Martin Graves is the CEO, Emily added. He's the one pushing for the demolition. Margaret sighed. It seems his reach extends across generations. A realization settled over them. Our fathers tried to protect the community center from the same corporate greed we're fighting today, Emily said. And they were torn apart because of it, Jack finished. Margaret placed a gentle hand on their clasped ones. Perhaps you two can succeed where they couldn't. Leaving Margaret's house, the weight of their discovery pressed upon them. The moon cast a silvery glow over the quiet streets as they walked. This changes everything, Emily murmured. Jack nodded. It's not just about saving the center anymore. It's about honoring our father's legacy. But why didn't my dad ever tell me? Emily wondered aloud. Maybe he wanted to protect you from the pain, Jack suggested. Or perhaps he regretted how things ended and didn't know how to mend it. Emily looked up at the stars. I wish we could ask them. An idea sparked in Jack's mind. Wait, my father kept journals. Maybe there's something in them that could help us. Do you have them? She asked eagerly. They're at my family's old house, he replied. I haven't been there in years, but it's worth a try. They decided to make the trip the next day. As they parted ways for the night, there was a newfound closeness between them, a bond forged not only by their shared mission, but also by the intertwined fates of their families. The following morning, they drove to the outskirts of a neighboring town where Jack's childhood home stood, a modest farmhouse surrounded by overgrown fields. The house creaked as they entered, memories echoing in the quiet rooms. Everything should be in the attic, Jack said, leading the way up a narrow staircase. Dust motes danced in the sunlight filtering through the small window. Stacks of boxes and old furniture filled the space. They began searching, carefully opening boxes labeled with dates and scribbled notes. Here, Jack exclaimed, pulling out a leather-bound journal. He flipped through the pages, eyes scanning the handwritten entries. Emily watched as his expression shifted from curiosity to shock. What is it? She asked. He handed her the journal, pointing to a passage. My father wrote about being pressured by Graves Enterprises to convince your dad to support the development. They offered him incentives, money, a promotion, but he refused. Emily read the words, her heart pounding. So, your father stood his ground. Yes, but then he discovered that someone else in the town council was secretly working with Graves. When he tried to expose them, he was threatened. That must be why our father's friendship fell apart, Emily surmised. Maybe my dad thought your father betrayed him. Jack's jaw tightened. All this time, they were manipulated by the same people we're fighting now. A surge of determination coursed through them. We can use this, Emily said firmly. If we can prove that Graves Enterprises has a history of unethical practices, it might strengthen our case. Jack agreed. We need to gather as much evidence as possible. As they left the old house, a sense of purpose propelled them forward. Yet, questions lingered. Do you think Martin Graves knows about our connection? Emily wondered. Hard to say, Jack replied. But if he went to such lengths back then, he might try to stop us now. A hint of apprehension shadowed Emily's face. We need to be careful. Agreed, Jack said, his eyes meeting hers with resolve. But we're not alone in this. The chapter closed with them returning to Maplewood, their car loaded with journals and documents. The sun dipped low in the sky, painting the horizon with hues of gold and crimson, a symbol of the dawn of new revelations. As they drove, the weight of their father's past rested on their shoulders, but so did the hope of redemption. They were determined to right the wrongs of the past and protect the heart of their community. The path ahead was uncertain, but together they felt anything was possible. Back in Maplewood, Emily and Jack spread the journals and documents across the large wooden table in the community center's main hall. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns over the faded papers. They meticulously sorted through letters, meeting minutes, and personal notes, piecing together a narrative of their father's efforts to save the center decades ago. "Look at this," Emily said, holding up a letter dated June 15, 1985. "It's from my dad to the town council, proposing a community-led renovation project." Jack leaned over to read it. "And here's one from my father, offering pro bono architectural services for the project," he added, excitement building in his voice. They were working together to preserve the center, just like we are. As they delved deeper, they noticed frequent mentions of a third person, Samuel Whitaker, a close friend and collaborator. "He was on the town council back then," Emily recalled. "I think he's still a member." Jack's eyes widened. "Wait, Councilman Whitaker? The one who's been opposing us at every turn?" "Yes," Emily confirmed, a mix of surprise and confusion. "But if he was their friend and ally, why is he against us now?" Determined to find answers, they decided to visit Whitaker. They found him at his grand Victorian home on Maple Street, the front garden impeccably maintained but devoid of warmth. "Councilman Whitaker, we need to speak with you," Emily said when he answered the door. He regarded them coolly. "If this is about the community center, my position hasn't changed." "Please," Jack interjected. "We found something you need to see." Reluctantly, he allowed them inside. The parlor was adorned with antiques and portraits, a testament to a storied past. They laid out the letters and journals on the coffee table. "These documents show that you worked with our fathers to save the community center years ago," Emily began. Whitaker's expression softened as he picked up a photograph of the three men laughing together. "That was a long time ago," he said quietly. "What happened?" Jack asked gently. "Why are you opposing us now?" Whitaker sighed deeply, sinking into an armchair. "We had big dreams back then," he reminisced. "But when the council rejected our proposal, I lost faith. Thomas and Richard couldn't let it go, but I chose to move on. But now we have a chance to finish what they started," Emily urged. "We could use your support." He shook his head. "You don't understand. Graves Enterprises has a tight grip on this town. They've promised economic growth, jobs. Standing against them feels futile." "At what cost?" Jack countered. "Losing our heritage? Our sense of community?" Whitaker looked at the earnest faces before him, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "You remind me of them," he admitted, "so full of passion." "Help us," Emily pleaded, "for their memory, for Maplewood." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Whitaker stood up. "Perhaps it's time I made amends," he said softly. "I'll call an emergency council meeting." The following evening, the town council convened. News of Whitaker's change of heart had spread, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Council members murmured among themselves as Emily and Jack took their seats. Whitaker opened the meeting. "I've been reminded recently of the importance of our community's heritage," he began. "I propose we reconsider the decision to allow the demolition of the community center." Gasps and whispers rippled through the room. Another council member stood. "But the contracts are already in place. Reversing this could lead to legal repercussions." "Perhaps," Whitaker conceded, "but preserving our town's history is worth the risk." A vote was taken, and to Emily and Jack's elation, the council narrowly agreed to halt the demolition pending further review. Their victory, however, was short-lived. The next day, a sternly worded letter arrived from Graves Enterprises, addressed to the town council and copied to local media. It threatened legal action for breach of contract, demanding substantial compensation for delays and damages. "This is a scare tactic," Jack said, crumpling the letter in frustration. "But it's working," Emily replied anxiously. "People are frightened. The town can't afford a lawsuit." As fear spread, some residents began to withdraw their support. Attendance at meetings dwindled and donations slowed. Even Whitaker seemed hesitant, the weight of responsibility heavy on his shoulders. One afternoon, as they brainstormed solutions, Jack received a call from an unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Thompson," a deep voice responded. "This is Martin Graves." Jack's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want?" "I admire your tenacity," Graves said smoothly. "But you're fighting a losing battle. I'm prepared to offer you a position at our firm in New York. A significant promotion, substantial salary increase." Jack's eyes narrowed. "And in return?" You cease your opposition and convince the town to proceed with the project. Jack felt a surge of anger. I'm not for sale, Mr. Graves. Graves chuckled. Everyone has a price. Think it over. He hung up, his heart pounding. Emily noticed his distress. What happened? Graves tried to bribe me, he explained. He wants me to betray everything we've worked for. Emily placed a reassuring hand on his arm. We won't let him manipulate us, but the encounter highlighted the immense power they were up against. How can we compete with that? Jack asked, frustration evident in his voice. Emily took a deep breath. We need to think bigger. If we can't fight them alone, maybe we can find someone who can help level the playing field. Like who? An investigative journalist, she suggested. If we can expose Graves Enterprises' unethical practices, public pressure might force them to back down. Jack considered this. It's risky, but it might be our best shot. They reached out to Lisa Carter, a reporter known for her hard-hitting exposes on corporate corruption. Intrigued by their story, she agreed to meet. During their interview, Emily and Jack presented all the evidence they had gathered. Documents from their fathers, records of Graves Enterprises' past dealings, testimonies from residents. This is compelling, Lisa remarked. If what you're saying is true, this could be a major story. Will you help us? Emily asked earnestly. I'll start digging, Lisa promised, but be prepared. Once this goes public, things could get intense. As days passed, tension in the town grew. Rumors circulated that Graves Enterprises was planning to accelerate the demolition, bypassing legal hurdles. Security guards appeared around the community center, and no trespassing signs were posted. One night, a town meeting was held to address the escalating situation. Emotions ran high as residents voiced their fears and frustrations. We can't afford to fight them, one man lamented. They'll bankrupt the town. Maybe we should accept their offer and move on, another suggested. Emily stood up, her voice strong despite the quiver of emotion. If we give in now, we lose more than a building. We lose our identity, our history. Is that a price we're willing to pay? Jack joined her. Our fathers fought to protect this place. We owe it to them and to ourselves to keep fighting. Whitaker rose, his gaze sweeping the room. They're right. I lost sight of what mattered once before. I won't make that mistake again. We must stand together. The room fell silent, the weight of the moment settling over everyone. Slowly, nods of agreement spread through the crowd. The chapter closed with a renewed sense of unity, but also with the looming question. Could their collective efforts withstand the might of a powerful corporation determined to crush any opposition? As Emily and Jack left the meeting, their resolve was tested, but unbroken. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but they also knew they weren't alone. With the support of their community and the possibility of exposing Graves Enterprises' corruption, they clung to hope. Whatever happens next, Emily said, looking up at the stars, we face it together. Jack nodded, a faint smile on his lips. Together, the morning sun bathed Maplewood in a golden glow as Emily and Jack stood outside the community center, a sense of anticipation hanging in the air. Days had passed since they met with Lisa Carter, the investigative journalist, and they awaited any news on her progress. Their phones buzzed simultaneously. It was a message from Lisa. Turn on the TV, Channel 8. Rushing inside, they joined a crowd that had gathered around a television in the diner. The news anchor spoke with urgency. In a shocking exposé, Graves Enterprises is under fire after allegations of unethical practices and manipulation of small towns have come to light. Footage of the community center filled the screen, followed by interviews with Emily, Jack, and several townspeople. Lisa's report was thorough, highlighting not only the current struggle, but also the historical context involving their fathers. She revealed documents showing Graves Enterprises' history of coercion and disregard for community welfare. As the segment ended, a hush fell over the diner, quickly replaced by cheers and applause. The story had struck a chord, and it was clear that their fight was now everyone's fight. Within hours, social media exploded with support for Maplewood. Hashtags like Save Maplewood and Stand with Emily and Jack trended nationwide. Messages of solidarity poured in from across the country, people sharing similar stories, offering assistance, and calling for action against corporate greed. Feeling a surge of hope, Emily and Jack knew this was the turning point they desperately needed. Meanwhile, at the headquarters of Graves Enterprises, Martin Graves watched the public's reaction with growing concern. His phone rang incessantly. Board members, investors, and public relations executives all demanding answers. "We need to issue a statement," his PR director urged. "Our stock is plummeting, and public outrage is mounting." Graves clenched his jaw. "Fine. Draft something. Emphasize our commitment to community values." But the damage was done. Sponsors began withdrawing, and legal investigations were initiated. Facing immense pressure, Graves Enterprises announced a halt to the Maplewood project. The news spread like wildfire. The townspeople gathered in the central square, where Emily and Jack stood atop the steps of the community center. "We did it," Emily exclaimed, tears of joy in her eyes. Jack smiled broadly. "No, we all did it, together." The crowd erupted in celebration, hugging, laughing, and sharing a collective sigh of relief. The bell in the old church tower rang out, echoing across the town as a symbol of victory. In the weeks that followed, the community center underwent much-needed repairs. Funded by donations from supporters nationwide, volunteers pitched in, revitalizing the building with fresh paint, new windows, and restored fixtures. The spirit of unity breathed new life into Maplewood. One evening, as the sun set in hues of pink and orange, Emily and Jack sat on the center's steps, watching children play in the freshly landscaped garden. "It's incredible how far we've come," Emily mused. Jack nodded. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." She looked at him, a soft smile playing on her lips. "We make a pretty good team." He took her hand gently. "I was thinking, maybe we shouldn't stop here. There are other towns facing the same struggles. What if we could help them too?" Her eyes lit up. "You mean start some kind of organization?" "Exactly," Jack affirmed. "A nonprofit dedicated to preserving community heritage and empowering people to stand up for themselves." Emily's excitement grew. "We could call it Heritage Hearts or Communities United." "Or Legacy Guardians," Jack suggested with a grin. She laughed. "We'll work on the name." Their shared laughter faded into a comfortable silence, the unspoken feelings between them palpable. Jack turned to face her fully. "Emily, through all of this, I've realized how much you mean to me." Her cheeks flushed slightly. "I feel the same way." He leaned in and their lips met in a tender kiss, a promise of new beginnings. As word spread about their nonprofit initiative, support flowed in from all corners. They established the Community Legacy Foundation, dedicated to aiding towns in preserving their cultural landmarks and resisting unethical developments. Their first project took them to a small town in Pennsylvania, facing a similar threat. Armed with their experience and fueled by their passion, they guided the residents in mounting a successful campaign. Back in Maplewood, the community center became a hub of activity, hosting art classes, dance workshops, and local events. The very walls seemed to hum with renewed energy and purpose. On the anniversary of their victory, a grand celebration was held. People from neighboring towns joined in, turning it into a festival of unity and heritage. Emily and Jack took the stage, sharing their journey and encouraging others to believe in the power of community. Together, we proved that no obstacle is insurmountable. Emily addressed the crowd. "Our history, our stories, they matter, and when we stand united, we can protect them." Jack added, "This isn't just about buildings, it's about preserving the heart and soul of who we are." The audience responded with a standing ovation, the applause echoing into the night. As the festivities continued, Emily and Jack watched with contentment. Their journey had been arduous, filled with challenges and uncertainties, but it had led them to a place of fulfillment neither had anticipated. "What's next for us?" Emily asked softly. Jack smiled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together." She leaned into him. "To think, it all started with a spilled cup of coffee," he chuckled. "Maybe I should thank that gust of wind." Their laughter mingled with the sounds of joy around them, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The story of Maplewood became an inspiration to many, a reminder that courage and unity can triumph over adversity. Emily and Jack's nonprofit grew, touching lives and fostering change in countless communities. And so, under the same stars that had witnessed their struggles, they forged ahead, partners in purpose and in life. Their legacy was not just in the saved walls of a building, but in the hearts they touched and the hope they ignited. "Hold on." You want to know what happened when Jacob got to the cabin? David disappeared for 15 years and now shows up out of nowhere. There's something really strange going on, right? You won't want to miss what's next. Click the video on your screen now and find out what Jacob discovered.